You step into the shower after a long day, warm water hits your scalp. You apply shampoo and within seconds, thick foam spreads between your fingers. It feels powerful. It feels effective. The scent signals cleanliness. The squeaky finish tells you it worked. But here is the question almost no one asks. What exactly did that clean sensation just do to the living tissue on your scalp? Because your scalp is not fabric, it is not a plate, it is biologically active skin filled with blood vessels, nerve endings, immune cells, and most importantly, hair follicles in different stages of the anagen cycle. The growth phase of your hair depends on stability, it depends on balance, and yet many cleansing routines focus only on removing oil, not on preserving the follicular environment. Today we investigate 7 ingredients commonly found in shampoos that may disrupt that environment in certain individuals, not because they are evil, not because they are poison, but because biology is nuanced, and near the end, we will uncover the deeper mechanism that connects them all. Why hair loss is rarely about one ingredient. Before analyzing any formula, we need to slow down and zoom out. Hair thinning is multifactorial, and that word matters. It means multiple pathways intersect at the level of the follicle. Genetics influence how sensitive your follicles are to androgens. Hormonal fluctuations can shorten the anagen cycle, the active growth phase where the strand is anchored deeply and actively produced. Nutritional status affects keratin synthesis, mitochondrial energy production, and cellular turnover. Iron status, protein intake, micronutrients, all play roles. Psychological stress can elevate cortisol, alter microcirculation, and subtly influence inflammatory signaling. Sleep regulates repair mechanisms and oxidative balance. And then there is the scalp barrier, a structure rarely discussed in conversations about hair growth. The barrier is composed of lipids, structural proteins, and a microbiome that coexist in balance. Its function is not only to retain hydration but to regulate immune exposure. When this barrier experiences repeated disruption, something subtle can begin. Chronic microinflammation, not dramatic redness, not visible wounds, but persistent low-grade inflammatory signaling around the follicle. Cytokines are released. Local immune cells remain slightly activated. Blood flow patterns may shift. Over time, in genetically predisposed individuals, this altered environment may contribute to miniaturization capillare. The follicle gradually shrinks, the dermal papilla becomes smaller, the hair shaft emerges thinner. Each cycle may produce a strand slightly reduced in diameter. This is not caused by one wash. It is not caused by one ingredient in isolation. It is about cumulative exposure. It is about frequency of use. It is about whether the scalp recovers between exposures. Here is a critical reflection. 2 people can use the same shampoo for years. One experiences no issue. The other develops persistent irritation and progressive thinning. The difference is not moral. It is biological. Individual sensitivity shapes response. Keep this entire framework in mind as we move into the first ingredient, because without it, every discussion becomes oversimplified. Strong surfactants and barrier disruption. Sodium lauryl sulfate appears frequently on labels exactly under that name. It is an anionic surfactant designed to reduce surface tension, emulsify oils, and generate abundant foam. The industry values it because it cleans efficiently, is chemically stable, and creates that powerful lather people associate with deep cleansing. Foam signals effectiveness at a psychological level, but biology does not interpret foam the same way perception does. On a biochemical level, sodium lauryl sulfate interacts with lipids. It solubilizes them. That includes excess sebum, environmental residue, and styling product buildup. But it can also interact with components of the scalp's lipid matrix that maintain barrier integrity. When that matrix is repeatedly reduced, transepidermal water loss increases. Hydration levels drop. The stratum corneum becomes more permeable. The scalp may feel tight, slightly dry, or unusually reactive. In some individuals, itching follows. That itching is not random. It often reflects early irritation. And irritation activates immune signaling pathways. Langerhans cells detect disturbance. Inflammatory mediators are released. This is where chronic microinflammation can begin, quietly, not visible, not dramatic, but persistent if exposure continues. Does this mean sodium lauryl sulfate directly causes hair loss? No, the relationship is indirect. It is environmental. Repeated barrier disruption may influence the follicular environment over time, especially in those already genetically predisposed to miniaturization. And here is a crucial distinction that changes how you interpret what you see in the shower drain. Breakage is not the same as true shedding. When the shaft weakens from dryness and reduced elasticity, hair can snap along its length. That short broken strand may look like loss, but the follicle may still be firmly an anagen, actively producing hair. True shedding involves release from the follicle during telogen. The root bulb is visible, the mechanisms are different. Understanding that difference reduces unnecessary fear, because fear itself elevates stress signaling, and stress, as we established, feeds back into the cycle. The question becomes not whether strong surfactants are universally harmful, but whether your scalp barrier is resilient enough for the frequency with which you use them. Chapter 4: Milder Surfactants and the Role of Frequency Sodium. Laureth sulfate is chemically modified to be milder than its lauryl counterpart. It appears as sodium laureth sulfate on labels and is widely used because it balances cleansing efficiency with improved skin compatibility. For many people, it performs without noticeable irritation. That is important to acknowledge. The discussion is not about universal harm, it is about context. Even milder surfactants can create issues when frequency of use is high. Daily washing, and in some cases twice daily washing after workouts or styling, exposes the scalp repeatedly to cleansing agents. Each wash removes sebum. Sebum is not dirt. It is a lipid mixture produced to lubricate hair, maintain flexibility, and protect the scalp barrier. When sebum is stripped aggressively and often, the sebaceous glands may respond by increasing production. This is known as rebound oil production. More oil leads to more washing leads to more stripping. A cycle forms. Over time, subtle inflammation may persist, not because the surfactant is inherently aggressive, but because the barrier never fully recovers between exposures. The follicular environment thrives in stability, not oscillation. It prefers equilibrium rather than repeated extremes of dryness and oiliness. Here is a micro loop worth pausing on. If your scalp feels oily faster than it did years ago, is it truly overproducing oil as a primary condition, or is it compensating for frequent cleansing? That single distinction changes strategy. Stronger shampoo may intensify the cycle, reduced frequency may restore balance. Frequency is rarely discussed in marketing conversations, yet it is central to barrier resilience. A formula that is tolerated twice per week may not be tolerated daily. Biological tolerance depends not only on ingredient identity, but on exposure pattern. That nuance is often missing in simplified ingredient debates. Chapter 5: Preservatives and Contact Sensitivity. DMDM, hydantoin, is a preservative used to prevent microbial growth inside the bottle. Preservation is not optional. Water-based products without adequate preservation can harbor bacteria and fungi. That risk must be controlled. From a formulation standpoint, preservatives protect consumers. However, DMDM hydantoin belongs to a group known as formaldehyde-releasing preservatives. It slowly releases small amounts of formaldehyde to maintain antimicrobial stability. In many individuals, this causes no reaction. In others, particularly those with heightened sensitivity, it may trigger contact dermatitis. Contact dermatitis can present subtly at first. Mild itching, a faint burning sensation, flaking that resembles dandruff, sometimes slight redness that goes unnoticed. When inflammation persists around follicles, the microenvironment changes. Immune cells release signaling molecules such as cytokines. These molecules influence local tissue behavior. They can alter the signaling that regulates the hair cycle. Again, this does not mean overnight shedding, not dramatic patches, not sudden baldness. Chronic microinflammation is gradual. It modifies the environment quietly. In predisposed individuals, that sustained signaling may influence how robustly follicles re-enter the anagen phase. Importantly, many people tolerate such preservatives without issue. Sensitivity is not universal. This reinforces the concept of individual variability. Two scalps, two immune systems, two different outcomes. If irritation resolves after switching to a formula, without that preservative, that observation matters. It is data. The scalp communicates through sensation long before visible thinning occurs. Listening early prevents escalation. Ignoring persistent itching allows inflammatory cycles to continue longer than necessary. Chapter 6: Fragrance and Immune Signaling. Fragrance or parfum often represents a blend of multiple compounds. It enhances sensory experience. It creates brand identity. It makes shampoo enjoyable to use. Scent is powerful psychologically. It shapes perception of cleanliness and luxury. Yet fragrance is among the most common triggers of contact dermatitis globally. When immune cells in the scalp recognize certain fragrance components as potential irritants, they activate defense pathways. This activation may lead to itching, warmth, or subtle redness. Sometimes the sensation is mild enough to be dismissed. Repeated exposure is where biology becomes relevant. When immune activation happens occasionally, tissue recovers. When activation happens frequently, low-level inflammatory signaling may persist. That persistent signaling contributes to the concept we introduced earlier: chronic microinflammation. In individuals already experiencing androgen-related miniaturization, this additional inflammatory stress may amplify visible thinning over time, not because fragrance directly stops hair growth, but because the follicle is sensitive to its environment. A calm environment supports stability in the anagen cycle. An inflamed environment may alter signaling thresholds. This does not mean fragrance is inherently harmful. It means immune response is personal. One person tolerates it perfectly for decades, another develops sensitivity after years of exposure. The shift can be gradual, and this connects forward to something crucial. The follicle does not operate in isolation. It responds continuously to its environment. That environment includes inflammation level, oxidative stress, microbial balance, hormonal signaling, and barrier integrity. When several small stressors accumulate, the combined effect may matter more than any single ingredient alone. Chapter 7: Alcohol and Lipid Integrity. Isopropyl. Alcohol is used in certain formulations to enhance penetration and create lighter textures that feel fresh and weightless on the scalp. In moderate concentrations, within well-balanced systems, it may be tolerated without noticeable disruption. The nuance lies in frequency and concentration. In higher amounts, or when exposure becomes repetitive, alcohol can increase dryness by dissolving surface lipids that help preserve barrier integrity. This does not create immediate damage, but it can temporarily weaken the protective matrix of the scalp. For resilient scalps, this disruption may be minor and quickly repaired. For already compromised barriers, however, the effect can be amplified. Dryness increases, sensitivity rises, irritation becomes more likely. Irritation triggers inflammatory mediators. Those mediators influence local follicular signaling, and although the chain reaction is subtle, it is biologically plausible and cumulative. Before we move forward, this is essential to remember: shampoo alone does not define hair destiny. Diet influences cellular energy, hydration supports tissue elasticity, sleep regulates repair pathways, stress alters oxidative balance, the scalp reflects systemic health. When systemic stress is elevated, tolerance to topical stress may decrease, and that interaction matters more than most people realize. Chapter 8: Silicone Buildup and Perception of Thinning. Dimethicone is commonly listed on labels and widely used for its ability to coat the hair shaft, reduce friction, and enhance shine. From a fiber protection standpoint, this can be beneficial. It improves slip, decreases mechanical damage, and helps maintain smoothness. The concern arises not at the strand level, but at the scalp level, particularly when non-water-soluble silicones accumulate over time. Excessive occlusion may trap sebum, sweat, and debris near follicular openings. In individuals prone to seborrheic tendencies, this altered surface environment may shift microbial balance, flaking can increase, mild irritation may develop, and subtle inflammatory signaling may follow. It is important to clarify something here: silicones do not stop follicles from producing hair. They do not directly interrupt the anagen cycle. However, buildup can weigh strands down, reducing volume and lift. Hair appears flatter, thinner, less dense. Anxiety often follows visible change, and stress itself can influence shedding dynamics. Here lies another loop. Sometimes what appears to be progressive biological loss is partly cosmetic and reversible with appropriate cleansing adjustments. Distinguishing perception from pathology is critical if we want rational decisions instead of reactive ones. Chapter 9: Niacinamide and Barrier Recovery. After examining potential stressors, we shift the energy, because not every ingredient threatens the follicular environment. Some are designed to support it. Niacinamide, also listed as vitamin B3, is increasingly used in scalp-focused formulations. Its primary role is barrier support. On a physiological level, niacinamide helps regulate lipid synthesis in the skin. It supports ceramide production. Ceramides are critical components of the barrier matrix. When ceramide levels are stable, transepidermal water loss decreases, hydration improves, reactivity lowers. Why does this matter for hair growth? Because a stable barrier reduces unnecessary immune activation. Reduced irritation means reduced inflammatory signaling. Lower inflammatory signaling helps preserve a calm follicular environment. Niacinamide has also been studied for its ability to modulate sebum production. Excess oil can contribute to microbial imbalance. Balanced oil production supports microbial equilibrium, and microbial equilibrium influences scalp comfort. Important clarification. Niacinamide does not force hair to grow. It does not override genetics. What it can do is help maintain a healthier environment in which follicles operate, and environment influences outcome over time. Here is a reflection worth considering. If your scalp frequently feels reactive, tight, or irritated, perhaps the solution is not stronger cleansing, perhaps it is barrier reinforcement. Chapter 10. Caffeine and follicular signaling. Caffeine appears clearly on labels when included. It is often marketed aggressively. The science behind it is more nuanced than advertisements suggest. In laboratory studies, caffeine has demonstrated potential to influence follicular signaling pathways related to androgen sensitivity. Specifically, some in vitro research suggests it may counteract certain effects of dihydrotestosterone at the follicle level. However, laboratory conditions are not identical to real scalp conditions. Concentration, penetration, and exposure time matter. What caffeine may realistically offer is mild stimulation of microcirculation and support for metabolic activity within the follicle. Follicles are highly energy-dependent structures. They require ATP production to sustain the anagen phase. Does caffeine reverse advanced miniaturization? No evidence supports that claim, but can it help maintain a supportive environment in early stages when combined with overall scalp health? Possibly. The key is expectation management. When an ingredient is presented as a miracle, disappointment follows. When it is understood as supportive, it fits into a broader strategy. And this connects to something deeper. Growth is rarely about stimulation alone. It is about reducing the factors that interfere with stability. Chapter 11. Panthenol and the breakage illusion. Panthenol, often labeled as pro-vitamin B5, functions primarily as a humectant and conditioning agent. It attracts and retains moisture within the hair shaft. It improves elasticity. Elastic fibers resist snapping under tension. Why does this matter in a discussion about hair growth? Because breakage and true shedding are frequently confused. True shedding involves the entire follicle cycle. The hair detaches during the telogen phase. A small white bulb is visible at the root. This is physiological. Breakage, on the other hand, occurs along the shaft. It is mechanical. It is often worsened by dryness, chemical processing, or reduced elasticity. When panthenol improves shaft flexibility, breakage decreases. Fewer broken strands in the sink create the perception of fuller hair. The follicle count may not change, but apparent density improves. This psychological shift is powerful. Reduced anxiety lowers stress signaling. Lower stress may indirectly support healthier cycles. Understanding the difference between quebra and queta real changes expectations. It transforms how you evaluate products, and it prevents misattributing mechanical damage to biological failure. Chapter 12. The mechanism that connects everything. So what truly unites the 7 potentially disruptive ingredients and the 3 supportive ones? It is not a battle between toxicity and purity. It is not about clean versus dirty labels. It is about environment modulation. Every follicle lives inside a microenvironment. That environment is shaped by barrier stability, inflammatory load, oxidative stress levels, microbial balance, hormonal signaling, and frequency of exposure to cleansing agents. None of these factors operate alone. They interact continuously. Chronic microinflammation, even when invisible, can gradually alter the signaling landscape surrounding the follicle. Cytokines shift. Oxidative stress increases subtly. Blood flow dynamics may change. Over time, in genetically predisposed individuals, this altered environment can contribute to progressive miniaturization. The follicle shrinks incrementally. The growth phase shortens. The strand emerges thinner. In other individuals, the same exposures produce no visible change. That is the crucial variable. Individual sensitivity. Genetics determine baseline vulnerability. Lifestyle determines resilience. Frequency of use determines cumulative load. Shampoo is neither villain nor miracle. It is a tool interacting with living tissue. Used aggressively and frequently without regard to barrier recovery, it may contribute to subtle stress signaling. Used thoughtfully, with awareness of scalp response and adequate recovery time, it can support balance rather than disrupt it. The deeper mechanism is not about one ingredient in isolation. It is about cumulative signaling over time. The follicle listens every day. It responds not only to what you apply, but to how often, in what context, and on what biological terrain. And this brings us back to where we started. That intense, clean feeling. The thick foam. The sensation of power. The real question was never whether foam means clean. The real question was whether the environment beneath that foam remains calm, stable, and resilient enough to sustain the anagen cycle long term. Healthy hair does not begin with aggression, it begins with equilibrium, not intensity, but consistency, not extremes, but balance. Because in the end, growth is not forced, it is permitted by an environment that feels safe enough to sustain it.